TPE 365 initiative aims to provide quality service before and after our on-site placement exchange. So welcome. Today's webinar is about the art and science of negotiation, and I'm happy to welcome two fabulous panelists today. So before I have them introduce themselves, I just have a few announcements. So first, our panelist, Dr. Chris Miller, is unable to join us today. He's regretfully out of the office. But don't worry, we have somebody else who will be joining us, but we are having some technical difficulties on that end. So when she joins us, we will happily welcome her to our webinar. All right, so also we'll be using the hashtag TPE 2015, and if you'd like to, you can follow us at TPE 2015, and the handle will be at the bottom of our slide. All right, so if this is your first roundtable, know that after the panelists introduce themselves, we'll go through a series of questions and where our panelists will share their insights with you. At the end, we'll take questions from you. However, you can insert them throughout the presentation on the dashboard where it says questions. So without further ado, I'm going to have our panelist who is signed in right now introduce herself, and then we will get started. Jennifer, would you like to start?
I would love to. So I'm Jennifer Hiatt. I serve right now as the Executive Director of Residence Life and University Housing at the University of Arizona. And fortunately, I have also served for about 5 years at the Spelman & Johnson Group. They're a higher education executive search firm. So for much of my time there in 5 years, I negotiated salaries and other opportunities for about 75 jobs. So I hope to be able to provide you with not only those 2 years, those 2 jobs, but also like my 25 years of being in higher education, not only in those 2 positions, but also at the New Mexico State, but also at Arizona State University.
Thank you, Jen. We're just going to start the questions. Are you ready?
We are ready.
Okay. So when do you think it's an appropriate time to negotiate a salary or to even ask if the salary is negotiable? How would you know that?
So I always feel like you should know that from the get-go, from the time that an opportunity is online or that you see it, whether it is through the Chronicle or another search engine. But also, you should never start to enter a salary negotiation until you've been offered a job. So if you get to the end of the opportunity, you should wait until like they've offered you like $10,000, and then you could say, we want $12,000. But I would want you to always think about, like, if you see a job and you know that it is for $10,000 and you know you need like $40,000, why are you actually applying for the position? So be sure that you are aware of the fact of how much the salary range is before you start.
Great, and I guess that leads into our next question. So what about positions where it may seem that there is no room for negotiation? Perhaps, perhaps they've told you, or perhaps you just feel like there isn't. What are some other things or items that a candidate could consider negotiating for? And many of the people listening today are just finishing grad school or about to and entering their first job. How would they navigate that?
So if a job is posted and it says that the salary range is for $10,000, I ask the question all the time, if you know that you need $15,000, but you know the top end of that range would be 10, like, why would you apply for the job? Or, and also the other way is, if you know you need something else, like you need parking or you need benefits that they're not willing to actually comply with, like, what do you do? So I would say the only time to respond to those is when you know that you have an actual offer and that you are also willing to say, like, what are these things that might also be non-negotiables for me? And, when I thought about my time when I worked for Spelman & Johnson, one of the things I learned is you have to make sure that everybody who is involved in your search, whether it's family, friends, anything else that would be factors in your job, I would want you to make sure that you knew those things before you went into the job search, particularly when you get to an on-campus interview. because that is when it becomes more serious for you and for your campus. And make sure that you have all that information like that you would ever need to acquire before you would actually go into that search.
Yes, thank you. Great advice. So, and we'll get in, there's a question about negotiating moving expenses a little bit later, but what about if somebody wanted to negotiate, maybe as a first-year hall director or first-year coordinator, professional development money? What are some of, how would somebody ask for that, or is that even appropriate?
You know, Julie, thanks for that great question. I would say that they should always ask that, particularly about professional development. Like, what's the nomenclature, or what is like the standard in our department for professional development? And how would I know that? Like, is it something that is stated within the department, or is it something that I would have to ask for in the negotiation? I think that's always an appropriate question to ask during the interview process.
Thank you. So now the next question, and if I could get my act together and change the slide, when is it appropriate to use other offers as leverage in negotiating, or is it never?
Okay, so this is my personal preference. I would tell you that you always want to have a relationship with your organization that they would know that you are leveraging this particular opportunity for other opportunities. And I know that sounds very different from what you might have heard, but I believe that there's too much social media and too much like presence on, whether it would be on a university website or other ways, that they would know that you are actually a candidate. So I think it's always more appropriate to tell them that you're actually planning on using this opportunity to leverage your next appointment. And I would say, like, if you're going to do that, like, are you trying to come back to your institution and ask them for money, or are you actually trying to make sure that you have stability in that appointment? So I would say make sure that you're open and that you are willing to talk to all entities about what you're doing. And I would also say to the institution that you are actually applying to, that you tell them, like, here's what I'm doing. Like, I am also trying to, like, look at a ton of opportunities, because they might want to know that as you're going through this process.
Great, thank you. The next question, how can candidates successfully negotiate relocation stipends or moving expenses? When is it appropriate to ask that? Would they ask that before, during an interview process or after they've received a job?
Sometimes it's actually stated in your in the actual job application. So sometimes moving expenses and relocation stipends are not listed. So if it is not listed, sometimes it's like a non-negotiable. You are not able to actually get any compensation for those two. But sometimes it's something you can say, like, well, it's going to cost me more to move my family from California all the way to Ithaca, New York. But I think you have to ask those things in your, as you start to talk about, like, here's how much I want for, here's my start date, here is where I'm headed, and you might be able to get some of those expenses paid for. But many times they say in the job description, unfortunately, this is the maximum that we can pay. And when they say that to you, you have to believe them. If they say we can only pay $1,500, you have to like say, yes, I understand that.
Yes, you should say, yes, I understand that. And I think, and maybe you know this, that sometimes it's not that they don't want to pay for you to come, but there are
Correct.
restrictions on money, how they can use money. So it's not necessarily that, they wouldn't want to give that to you.
Yeah, and Julie, thank you for saying that, because sometimes for public institutions, depending upon like the level of where you sit in the institution, delineates how much they can pay for you, and sometimes at other institutions, like a private institution, they can give you more than that. So just remember.
Right. Now, the next question, I guess, is for somebody who might already be has been in a job for a while, how would somebody go about asking for a raise at a current job, or asking for anything else that they might be needing at that time in their career?
Thanks, Julie. I think that asking for a raise is one of the difficult things that we have to do. So I would say bring forth all the work that you've done that goes about not only, when you think about your resume, think about the bullet points of what you do for a job. And then also think about the significant accomplishments that you've had in that job. And I want you to think about, what have I provided for this organization that they might not have otherwise been able to actualize in this work? So I want, not what you get paid for, like being on call or providing some kind of opportunity for the institution, but what did you do that was above and beyond that? And I would always look at those accomplishments as what you would bring to the table when you ask for a raise. So yes, you asked me to do this cadre of skills, but now I also brought you this, and that's why I deserve a raise. And I think I would say that to everybody every single year. Like, here's who I have been. Here's what I can bring for the next year. And even if they don't ask you in terms of your standard operating procedure of having evaluations, that you would do that on every anniversary that you have at that institution. Like, you would say, hey, today is June 5th, and I'm going to tell you what I did this last year. They might take it or not take it, but you're at least describing to them the difference between who you were before you got there and who you are now.
Yeah, that's great. Just another way to advocate for yourself.
Yes, for sure.
And so to add to that, what if you would like to negotiate, maybe you'd like to negotiate for a raise, but then also maybe negotiate for other responsibilities or other things? Is that appropriate at the same time? If it's
yeah. Thanks, Julie. I think that it's always fair to talk about what the work that you do and the worth, so not just the work, but the worth, that what do you do relational to other people who are at peer institutions. It's always a good thing to have those measures in your heart and soul. But I also think you have to remember that, why are you staying at that institution? And how does it matter to you to be particularly there? Like, are there reasons that you're staying at the University of Arizona versus going someplace else? And I have to own the reasons that I stay here. But I also have to say, here are the measures and the market difference that I can tell you that I've made in this organization. And I have to be proud of those things. And I want you to feel comfortable about talking about those different markers through time.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so our last question is just overall advice, but I'm going to go to the questions, and we'll just
we had questions, ma'am.
Yeah, we have questions already.
Okay.
So that's great.
She hasn't called in, by the way.
So the one question we have is, what about when position postings do not indicate the salary for the position? Instead, it states negotiable or commensurate with experience. When is it appropriate to ask what the range is for those jobs?
I definitely feel like it's clearly before you have a campus interview. So if you found out that you needed $20,000 a year and the range was 10, I think that's a huge disparity. And that would be a clear marker to say, well, I definitely need $20,000 a year, and I can't go there if I only have 10. I think that's the time to say, unfortunately, I've reached a path that I can't make. I would never, ever, ever go to a campus interview where I didn't know the salary. And that is an appropriate time to ask, because you're giving your time and they are giving their time. And you have to remember that as much as you are giving what's worth to you, they are too. So if you don't know, when is the start date, would they give me relocation fees, any of that, I would definitely ask before that.
Great. So, and also, there is another question, and I've seen this also, that a lot of times they'll ask, they won't enter a salary, but they'll ask that you, in a cover letter, write what you would like to make as the salary. How do you navigate that, and what if you, would you just like do research on roles that maybe are in the same region, that do the same thing, and then that way you know like the range of what that position would make? How would somebody just guess that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So Julie, like at public institutions, they like have to like give you the information about what the last incumbent made that for that position. But at private institutions, they have to tell you like a little bit of a range. So they can say it could be from like a small range of $500 to a big range of like $50,000. But they do have to give you a range, because they're not obligated to actually tell you the last incumbent's actual salary. But I would, before you go on a campus interview, I would always make sure that you knew. Because if you think about the time that you're putting into this process, that's a big question. Because if it doesn't meet any of your expectations, I think you should know before then. Because it's just too much for them, and it's just too much for you.
Jen, I think our second panelist might be on now.
Okay. Awesome.
Let me see if that's true now.
Hello.
Hi.
Yay, we're all here. And we have so much time left, so we can all still talk about and answer questions.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
So would you like to introduce yourself? Welcome.
Sure. My name is Mariah Leatherwood. I am an Assistant Vice President here at Marquette University. And I am filling in for Dr. Chris Miller today, who artfully was not able to negotiate out of jury duty. And he has asked me if I would attend in his place.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Mariah, for being here. I really appreciate it. So since we got through some of those questions, was there anything, if you were able to listen during that time, is there anything that perhaps you wanted to add to what Jennifer answered to any of the questions we had before?
I was able to listen to most of the webinar. I might just kind of recap. I thought Jen's comments were absolutely excellent. It is important to know, kind of do your homework before you're applying for a particular position. Have some idea about the salary range, and if you don't know, asking HR is not inappropriate. Oftentimes they will have a range listed so you know kind of what you're getting into. There are multiple points of negotiation. You probably are able to negotiate best when you are first applying for that job, but after you have reached the last set of interviews. And there are other options for negotiation, as Jen, I believe, has mentioned, such as relocation expenses. Sometimes you can inquire about other benefits such as flex time, etc. But public institutions, as you all know, are sometimes held to different types of standards in terms of salaries. But private institutions, too, try to maintain some level of equity across job classifications so as not to get out of equity with other members of the campus community. So oftentimes people are offering what they are able to offer for a particular candidate.
Right, excellent. Thank you. I'm going to go through these questions now. There's a few that I want to get to.
Yeah.
And I think Jen might have mentioned this a little bit, but just in case maybe somebody joined us late. So what if you're negotiating a salary? What percentage or amount of money would be appropriate to ask for? So would it be, you know, should they try to stay within the range that's given, or how would you recommend that somebody move forward with asking for a dollar amount?
Well, again, I would use kind of a market standard. Find out what comparable positions at other institutions of similar size are offering for that position, And if you're attempting to negotiate a raise or an increase in salary after being on a job for a certain number of time, then it really depends upon the type of annual merit increases that have been given. Generally, right now we're running, if we're lucky to receive those annual merit increases, they've been pretty modest, 1.5%, 2.5% at the most. Would you say, Jen?
Yeah, I would for sure.
So if you're looking at another job classification or an increase, a substantial merit increase because of a particular job that has been well done, I would say the ceiling levels right now are probably, other than 5%, is going to really look pretty excessive unless it's a substantial increase in job responsibility or title.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I would add to you all is that the only time that you can really truly affect your salary is when you go into the job. And so I agree with what we talked about, that you have to walk this fine line of, if the job is listed at $10,000, do I ask for 20 again, which is way too much. But I would say to you that you also have to advocate for yourself, because when they say to you, we may or may not be able to give you an increase, what if the answer is no? Would you be satisfied with your job? So I was helping somebody negotiate a job about 3 weeks ago, and I said, what would you be happy with? What would you be content with? And if you did not get that, would you be unsatisfied and want to leave in 3 or 4 years? So I always believe that you don't want to be ridiculous and ask for, you don't want to ask for $100,000 more than they're offering. But you do want to say, I think this job is worth X amount of money. And as long as we've mentioned before, that you've done your market research and you feel really good about that, I would advocate for yourself. As long as you feel like it's in the bandwidth of what is appropriate, I would say ask for it. Because in the end, would you stay there for 5 more years if they offered you a salary that was appropriate? And I often feel yes, people say yes to that answer. So in all the time I worked for Spelman & Johnson, one of the things I learned is that if people felt like it was still within that, that cadre of appropriateness for them, they knew the market research, they knew what the person had, the last incumbent had made. If they didn't feel insulted or that they were being taken advantage of, they were happy. And if you can't find that information, I would find somebody who can find that information for you. So if you don't know, how much do all the other hall directors make, or how much do all the other assistant deans make, I'd find somebody who knows that information.
Yes, absolutely. Some of the questions that are coming in are kind of, they're the same in that they are asked, okay, so there's a lot of people who are listening today who might just be finishing grad school. They've never had to do this before. So I think the question maybe is 2 parts. So one, if you've never had to, what, maybe for some reason they're afraid to ask because they don't want to appear that they aren't, maybe grateful for a job they might be getting, and to feel, that they're appearing unprofessional. So maybe just some tips on how would you approach asking a question about salary, or maybe moving expenses, etc. And then the other thing too is, I think that what you both are saying is accurate, is that there's a fine line, right? So if you're getting a job as a hall director, you're probably not going to ask for $50,000. So how do you still stay, know your worth, but then also know that this is your, this is your first job, and perhaps this may not be the time to ask for so much.
Right, go ahead.
I think, again, it's a matter of doing your homework. It's a matter of being patient. And it's also a matter of seeing the institution is not, or the university or college is not in a position where they're trying to take advantage of people. Generally, we have an acceptable range that we're able to offer for a particular job classification. We can offer a little higher in that range if the person is bringing a year or 2 of experience or more. Otherwise, we're probably going to be offering on the lower part of that range if it's somebody who's applying for a job for the first time right out of graduate school. And I think it's fair to ask, what is the range that you're looking for in terms of being able to offer for this position in terms of compensation? Are there other types of benefits that you would like me to be aware of? And in framing the questions in that way, it's not so much communicating to your potential new supervisor. You're not asking about what is it for me. It's almost what is it that you're looking for and what is it that you're going to be able to offer candidates for this position.
Yeah.
So every time I have asked for something in terms of what are the benefits or et cetera, I also try to frame it about what are you looking for a new hall director?
Right.
What are you looking for in terms of a coordinator of student programming?
Right.
So I'm giving them the opinion and the impression, and it's genuine that I want to know what they're looking for so I can see if I am a best fit candidate for this position.
That's a great point. I mean, I always feel like in part of the interview process, you should always say, like in my first year, what would be the measurable outcomes that you would look to me to be able to succeed in, that then you could tell me at the end of the year whether I did or did not meet those. It's a great question because then what you're asking is really a question of how will I know that I've been successful as a person? Like how would I have known that I've met what you expected this job to be? And you might think in your previous position, and this is I think this is a fallacy in everyone's job, but particularly in student affairs, like we think we know what a job is based on the people that we've been surrounded by. So if I am an RA, I look at my hall director and I think to that person, like I know what it means to be a good hall director. We don't know if that necessarily means that we know what it is to be a hall director at X institution. Or the same thing, if we think we are wanting to be an assistant dean, we've only seen assistant deans at our institution. We don't know what that necessarily means at the particular institution that we hope to be about. And so I would always ask that question, like, how are you going to measure my success? And how will I know that I've met those measures or not known? Will you tell me in 6 months? Will you tell me in 9 months? Or will you wait for a full year? Those are great questions to ask because not only are you asking them to tell you at the point in time, but you're also putting them on notice to tell you over time. Because nobody wants to know after a year you haven't met what we wanted you to do. And I think when you pose the question before you have a job, you're asking them to like be a partner with you in the process.
That's great, Jen. I like that. This is a partnership, or it should be.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Yeah, that's a great point because I think that you're right. It sets the tone for what you might be able to for the feedback you can get throughout the year.
Indeed.
I'm trying to look at these questions here. Some of them are the same questions, just asked different ways. So I need to get to them.
We're happy to take any and all of them.
All right. So when negotiating benefits, what do you negotiate with hiring manager or the supervisor versus human resources? And is there a difference? Should you just always go through the hiring manager?
My experience, and Jen, you may have a different experience with this, is my experience is generally the benefits packages are pretty well standardized. You may have choices along the way, either in terms of your deductible amount and your premium amount on your health care or the number of parties covered on your health care. But a lot of other benefits are fairly standardized, such as the number of vacation days or what the sick leave policy may be, or sometimes even moving expenses are fairly standardized, although I think there's maybe some more room there for negotiation depending upon how far away you live from the job site that you're moving to. But generally, you have a choice of do you select the dental, what type of health care you're selecting, and other types of benefits.
I would agree, and I would also say if they tell you something like we can only at this level offer you $2,500 of moving expenses, one of the things that we talked about earlier was you have to believe them, because you are going to enter into a contractual relationship that is going to last a long time. Like I would say a year of your life is a long time. So believe in that. Like they're not going to lie to you at that point. But also believe that if you ask them for $5,000, which is significantly more than that, and they say no, you also have to know, are there ramifications for me seeming like I didn't understand that they said $1,000 before? So just remember what that means, because you have to work with these people day in and day out.
Yes.
Yes, you really do. So the next question, so is it possible to negotiate higher pay based on full-time management experience for years after your undergrad? So the time that you spent before you went to grad school for, and and then you graduated and now you're looking for a higher ed position. How is that viewed? What do you think? What's some advice you have?
I would probably pose the question to the potential employer of, you've seen my resume, you probably have observed that I have a number of years of management experience prior to going to graduate school. What are your thoughts about that, and how might that affect the salary offer you're able to make?
Yeah, I think.
So Julie, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go, Jen.
I think that this is like concentric circles. So remember that you definitely have to have the both and, not to use a Texas colloquialism, but you have to have like perfect experience doing the work that you're asking to do, but also education. So I say this to people all the time. If they're asking you for sure for a master's, and that is a qualification, if you don't have a master's, don't apply, because your name is also who you are as a brand. And so like for the rest of my life, I own my name, and it's become a part of who I am, but I also want to have it be representative of who I am as a person. So applying for jobs that you are not qualified for is not helping you in any way, shape, or form. On the flip side, remember that if you get a PhD and you have no job experience, and so you're applying for the job because they say a PhD and 15 years of experience, and yes, you have the PhD, you've done great research, you've done a great job in the world of like doing research, but you don't have the years of experience, I would say the same thing. Still don't apply, because your name is still something that people will remember, because this field is still very, very small. As much as we want to act like, well, I don't know Julie, I do know Julie, and I will know her for the rest of my life, and she's going to have some feeling about me for the rest of her life. So remember, when you apply for a job, she's going to look through a list of all of the candidates and say, Jen Hiatt applied for this job that she was not, completely qualified for. So I say this constantly: do not apply for jobs that you are not qualified for. And I mean the minimums. If it says 10 years of experience or 3 years of experience and you don't have it, please don't apply.
I completely agree, and maybe I misunderstood that question. The years of management experience between the bachelor's and the master's would not offset receiving the master's.
Correct. Yeah.
That's always. And besides, generally if you've not met the minimum qualifications, you will not be receiving that callback for an on-site interview anyway, because the committee or the interviewing person will go through and immediately cull the set down by who meets those minimum qualifications. And I think Jen's point about your name is your brand, your reputation is what you stand for, that's so true. And higher ed is a smaller field than what we sometimes realize it is.
So thank you for agreeing to do this on short notice.
I will have great feelings about the two of you for the rest of my life. Thank you so much for being here. I think it just brings a good point about, I think that sometimes we, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself and every once in a while some people I work with, if we were student leaders in undergrad and then we were really great in our master's program, we probably haven't been told no a lot. And so I don't think that it's an inflation of thinking that we are better than we are, but at some point we need to like equalize what the experience we have and what people are looking for, and that's hard, I think, sometimes for people to get and to kind of come to terms with. Doesn't mean you're not good. It just means that there's, what does that mean? I guess it just means that there's still a lot to learn.
Yeah.
If I may be so bold as to offer my life perspective advice on negotiation in the job market, I tend to not think about my jobs as opportunities of negotiation. I tend to think of my jobs as my career path and what I am learning along the way. And I have always been open and receptive to taking on new assignments, things that sometimes are outside my comfort zone. And I think if you become identified in your unit or your division or whatever the unit of analysis may be as one of the go-to people, you're not going to have to worry about negotiating for salary or promotions. That's going to happen naturally as a function of you're seen as the person that we can give this assignment to, and they're going to be able to get that job done for us.
Yeah.
And the rest naturally follows because of your willingness to be that go-to person. And as a result, you're going to see a lot of different elements of the organization that other people may not see. And when you've had that experience, you'll find your perspectives broaden, and you'll have a more balanced look at what the college or university is attempting to accomplish with development of their students, their academic experiences, and so forth and so on. So it's a natural perspective and result that occurs.
Yes, thank you.
I just said, yeah, that's great. I just said to a group of college women who were asking about perspective about the next step. You want to always be thinking for yourself, what is the next best step for me? But you also want to be to your employer, like what you want to be the one that they think of when the next opportunity arises. So I would say whether you stay at your institution or you don't stay at your institution, I would want you to have somebody call you who you worked for 10 years ago and say, I would love if you would come work at the University of Arizona. That's what you want. You want to be the person who did everything you possibly could in your job to be efficient and motivated. And if you can't be that person, then find out what could I be motivated about? What other opportunities, whether within higher education or outside of higher education, is there something else that I could be giving my talents to? Because you clearly are motivated. If you're going to sign up for our webinar, you care about your life. You really do. And so just remember that it's all about finding where's your passion and where's your niche.
Yeah, that's great advice.
There's one last question here. How do you negotiate as an internal candidate when your school has a history of maybe not doing, I'm trying to read this. How do you negotiate as an internal candidate when your school has a history of offering internal candidates the minimum salary?
Do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. I will start by saying being an internal candidate is the toughest thing that you will do. Standing in front of your peers, unless you're being offered the position without a job search, it's hard. So if you have to do the actual process and stand in front of your peers, remember that they know your work. So when I go to Ithaca, New York, they don't know me. They have this perception of me while I'm there in the interview, but they don't necessarily know the dailiness of my work. But I would again go back to what we've said is like know how much other folks have made in that job. And more importantly than all of this is the thing I haven't said yet today is that I feel good about the money that I make every day. So I negotiated staunchly for my salary. But I also know that I come to work every day and feel like they pay me for what I'm worth. And I want you each to feel that way. I don't care if you're making $10 or $2 million. I want you to feel that way. And as long as you feel like they're paying you for what you're worth, you will give them everything you have. So every single day of my life, from the time I show up into my office, but long before those hours, so those hours beyond 5, I feel like I'm being paid my worth. And I want you each to feel that way. So just remember that. Like, if you don't feel that way, you're probably going to get grumpy, or you're going to feel like you know that somebody else is making a different wage than you're making, and you're going to get bitter. But as long as you know in your heart, like I know that I'm being paid what I should be paid, I think you'll be okay.
I agree, and that is, Jen, a wonderful mental space to be in, to feel grateful for the opportunity to do this work, to feel that we're being recognized for our good work and rewarded accordingly. I mean, ideally, that's what we're all hoping for.
Well, thank you both. And we probably, we have a few more minutes, and the last question that's up on the screen still is just the final question. And if there's anything that perhaps you feel that you left out or you'd like to leave our audience with a last piece of advice. So what other advice would you offer to candidates before we say goodbye today?
I'm not sure if I may have missed this in the interactions with the technical support folks, but in terms of offering a competing offer back to an employer, and whether or not that's good practice or bad practice or how to engage in that practice, my experience is once people start looking at other opportunities, there's a certain psychological result that occurs from looking at other opportunities. And I think the mental space then begins to be, perhaps it is time for me to consider other options, other universities, other positions, maybe even a change out of higher education in total. If you're going to bring your current employer an alternate offer or a competing offer, I think you need to be ready to accept that alternate offer. Mm-hmm. Because by bringing it, you can sometimes also be signaling to your current employer that you're leveraging for more money, more position, whatever the case may be, a promotion. And some employers don't engage in that process, or some universities actually make it a policy that they don't compete offers, meet competitive offers. So you just have to be aware all the way around of really being purposeful and planful about what you're doing. I would never recommend to someone to engage in that process in order to increase their position or salary at a current institution.
Thank you. Jen, do you have anything else?
No, I would just say, remember that I would be transparent. As soon as, just remember that everybody knows everything now in the ways that we interact on social media and in the public. So I would find it tough to be a candidate on campus without your name being known to many people that you're actually going out there and you're interviewing. So remember, you want to be the person who tells your employer, hey, I'm looking for jobs.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Mariah. I really appreciate you being here with us today and sharing your insight and your time with us. It's very important. And to everybody else, thank you. If you have any more questions, you can email us. And also, we have one more roundtable left for the year until the fall begins. And it's about what to expect in your first 90 days on the job, and that's on April 14th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So please join us for that, and there will be some advertisements going through social media soon so you can have the sign-up link. All right, so again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you all for being here, and have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.